SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
The tension between regulators and states is on the rise, and with news out of Illinois, it might be reaching a boiling point in the very near future. State lawmakers in the land of Lincoln are on the precipice of sweeping tax rate overhauls, and several other states are mulling similar drastic increases. Operators are doing their best to fend off the tax hikes, but the balance between appeasing states and bottom lines is tricky. Just ask the Massachusetts sportsbooks. We're going to discuss those tax hikes, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission no-shows, and more on today's episode of iGaming Daily. iGaming Daily is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalized player experiences with Optimove. You can join that group. Another special offer remains. Optimove get a first free month when you sign up at Optimove. The link for that is in the description below. With that out of the way, I am Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas, joined by media manager Charlie Horner, who fresh off of Malta?
Yeah, absolutely.
How was that? How was Casino Beats?
It was a really good event, yeah. I think all the attendees had a great time. The conference content was great. There was a big keynote from John Romero, the founding father of the first-person shooter who...
listened to the pod, the iGaming Daily, where the guys just fanboyed out on the whole thing. So yeah, I am familiar.
James was very excited. But it was a really good event, and the show moves on to Canada in a few weeks' time.
I know you're going from the beaches of Malta to it'll be nice weather though in Canada, although sometimes I feel like in Toronto, like it's raining and then an hour later it's really sunny and then it's raining again, so we'll see.
Be just like home.
Yeah, I know. You'll be used to it. Looking forward to that Canadian Gaming Summit coming up in 2.5 weeks, basically. So we'll talk about Canada when we get there. But for today, it's time to talk about Illinois. We are one governor's signature away from a new tax structure that moves the tax rate up and onto a sliding scale. Charlie, if you haven't seen this, essentially, the smaller operators, if you make up to 30 million in, they're saying AGR, adjusted gaming revenue, you can't do promo credit deductions in Illinois. So it's pretty close to GGR. 30 million, 20%, 30 to 50, 25%, 50 to 130%, 100 to 235%, 200 million plus, AKA FanDuel and DraftKings, they would be paying 40%. It's the first tiered online or tiered system I've seen, save for some states will do a different rate for retail than online. But, before we get into the fact that they, are jumping from a 15% rate, thoughts on the sliding scale aspect of it?
It's interesting. It's going to favor the smaller operators for sure. I mean, it looks a little bit more like how, personal tax would work in terms of taxing those who have more, and taxing those who have less. I'm sure the government relations departments at these big operators have probably had a lot to say in the development of this legislation. It's interesting that Illinois have decided to be the first state to go down this route. Usually, I would imagine that state legislators are a little bit cautious to try something new and just follow in the path that others have created. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this plays out long term.
Yeah, I mean, I like the tiered piece of this. Alex Kane from Sport Trade came on iGaming Daily a few months ago when we were talking about the federal excise tax, and he's always, Sport Trade kind of lobbied for something like this, where you are taxing people based on how much business they're doing, simply because the margins on these smaller sports books, for those who don't know, like things like payment processors and stuff, you get kind of discounted rates with PayPal and the like once you reach a certain scale. And you don't really get those discounts. Like payment processing is a huge expense for small operators. So you throw that in, you throw the fact that their hold tends to be a little lower in some of these. And you're talking about people that are they're holding 5% and then half of that goes to payments, and you're left with very little on the table at the end. So I like the tiered aspect of it. For the smallest operators, you're talking about a 5% increase, which here's another way to put it. It's a 5% increase. It's, 25% more than what they were paying before. There's a lot of ways to kind of cut this. If you, as you mentioned, government relations people, the Sports Betting Alliance has been on, they tried to do petitions. They tried to appeal to consumers and make sure that this didn't get through. And there is a chance the governor was the one who wanted like a flat 35% to begin with. So I don't think Pritzker is not going to sign. But, there is still that piece to it. SBA also kind of pointed out without promo credits, I think we've had the promo credit discussion on here before, that, it gets added to your handle. And so operators like being able to kind of deduct it off of their revenue. A promo dollar is not the same cost as a dollar, has always been my complaint with it, that I've never thought it was that bad to not be able to do promo deductions or to at least phase it out like we've seen in Colorado and Maryland and some other states. But, then they're saying, well, with that, if you do that and you don't let us deduct promo credits, which Illinois never has, by the way, that the effective tax rate is more like, 60% or something. And it's just like, well, no one's making you dole out promo credits.
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking away,
especially in a mature state like Illinois, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, bumping up the tax rate. I mean, let's just take it from the big two operators because they're going to go from 15% to 40%. I know going from 15% to 20% is big for the small operators, but going from 15 to 40% is huge for those big guys. It
is very big.
Yeah, that is really significant. And then the fact that you can't have promo deductions as well. Of course, it is a mature state, so how much money are you really giving away in promos anyway? But having those two on top of each other does make things quite expensive. And yeah, I'm sure there's going to be conversations had with the advisors of the governor, little words of, do you really need to do this? But at the end of the day, the vote was pretty, I think it was quite strong, wasn't it? I think it was a 37-22 decision.
Yep.
The final vote in the end.
Senate,
so
the House, I don't remember, but it was relatively substantial too, if I'm not mistaken.
So I would be very surprised if this didn't go through, but it's a very drastic change.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I don't love changing the rules of the game like this, but I also understand, in other industries, tax rates go up. I don't think they go up at this kind of pace, as you pointed out. 40% is nearly 3 times what you were paying. You maybe wouldn't have agreed to go in there if you knew that this was the situation. Ohio, there was a Washington Post article where Governor DeWine basically said he didn't double the tax rate because they are pushed to double the tax rate in the legislature because they needed the money. He was just pissed there were so many ads on TV. And what sucks about that is like, well, you doubled the tax rate in a state where a lot of small operators were willing to come in because it was 10%, because it was doable. And the people you're hurting the most are the people who are not advertising on television and not really the problem.
Yeah, I understand that argument. And it is, especially with the smaller operators, it's a particularly pertinent point. But at the end of the day, I don't think anywhere in the laws, these sports betting bills, it said that the tax rate is in Ohio 10% and in Illinois 15%, and it's going to remain like that forever. In other industries, like you say, tax rates change, For individuals, tax rates can change. And if the government decides that it needs to raise extra revenues and it sees gaming as a victim of that, then the operators kind of just have to get on with it. They can make a decision of whether they want to continue operating in that state or whether they want to close down. But they are going to have to just suck it up, I guess, and pay up.
I mean, I guess that's, we'll end with this segment with prognostication. When New York, a couple years ago, Jason Robbins and FanDuel representatives got before New York and said, if you keep the tax rate at 51%, this isn't tenable. We'll change prices. We'll make it less consumer friendly. I saw whispers on the internet that FanDuel and DraftKings might just pull out of Illinois, which felt alarmist until Chris Krafchick of Eilers and Krejcik tweeted about sports GGR. I was very surprised to see it. FanDuel's overall sports GGR from Illinois, it's like 1.2% of their business. Indiana is bigger. Kansas, Iowa, Kentucky, all bigger. So, I mean, if it's that small, maybe there is an argument that they up and leave. But do you think in the next year we see anybody leave or we see prices change in these high taxation states?
I probably do think that people will leave. I don't know whether it will be FanDuel, DraftKings. It might be some of the smaller operators who decide, especially in your Ohio's, for example, where they are going from 10 to 20% and all the ramifications that we have just mentioned. But I don't really see FanDuel and DraftKings giving up. I mean, they're behemoths of the industry who have been sort of aggressively attracting market share for the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think they're just going to give up like that. On the pricing point, maybe you'll see things tighten up a little bit in terms of pricing and being a little bit less customer friendly. But at the end of the day, these are all still incredibly competitive businesses who, are trying to acquire and retain users. And if one operator is going to give much less customer friendly prices, then they're just going to move on to the next operator. So I don't think it would get drastically worse.
Yeah, I doubt prices change. And Illinois is a large state. So I don't particularly think that the big players will leave, though, with this tiered structure. And some of these middlemen, like you said, maybe they potentially pull the plug. All right, talking about people potentially leaving, we're going to talk about how unfriendly Massachusetts is getting in a second. But first, let me take a second to compose myself. So we will be right back.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Charlie, we've talked about the Massachusetts Gaming Commission ad nauseum on this podcast, but we kind of have to talk about this meeting that happened early last week. There was essentially going to be a round table of operators, bettors, consultants discussing the practice of limiting winning bettors. It was an informal kind of discussion. So a couple of people, Captain Jack, who I've done panels with, Dustin Gauker, Brianne Dora-Shawal, and the operators were all invited. Then the panel happened, and the only operator to show up was Bally's, who doesn't even operate in the state. They just have a license and are launching later. Did this show up on your radar while you were in Malta? Was it big enough to kind of cross your path, even though you were busy with a conference?
At the time, it didn't come across onto my radar, but when I came back and I saw it, I thought, I've missed out on America's greatest regulators happenings once again. It's MGC meetings. It's like a soap opera sometimes. We've been following what these guys have been doing for well, it's coming up on 2 years actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was incredible. I wasn't expecting this at all.
So yeah, to be clear, we all kind of wrote the sensationalist no-show, stood up, etc. Here's what did happen. Every single operator communicated in writing to the MGC. We would be happy to discuss this, but there are pieces of this that we are not comfortable discussing in public because we think of them as trade secrets. So we would like to discuss them in executive session. If you haven't watched MGC meetings before, they very liberally grant executive session for things. But what I learned kind of after the fact is because this was informal and because it wasn't an adjudicatory hearing or a licensing hearing, the legal team probably didn't feel comfortable at the MGC being able to grant executive session because it wasn't an official thing. So with that off the table, the operators are just like, okay, well then if you're not going to give us cover to say what we want to talk about and we'll happily tell you, then we're just not going to come.
I can, we do laugh and joke at the start there, but I understand where the operators are coming from. I mean, they are being asked to talk about operational secrets, however you want to put it, operational quirks, how they do or do not limit winning bettors. It's pulling the curtain behind their strategies in terms of pricing and that kind of thing. In an informal setting, I can understand why they would want to do that in executive session. So yeah, I do understand that from a certain aspect, although almost all of the operators not showing up in one go is it's quite interesting.
You have to feel bad for poor Bally's showing up and then like somewhere someone's like, oh, we forgot to call them, didn't we? Kind of tells you how important Bally's is in the greater scheme of things. I mean, and I understand some of this too. Like you don't want to explain how you limit bettors on a meeting where bettors can listen. And throughout the gaming industry, casinos put caps on how much people can bet and what people can do. That it's a tricky spot to be in. Needless to say, the commission was not happy. Commissioner Brad Hill, who is usually one of the more jovial people on that group, said he was, quote, angry that they kind of wasted their time with this. And I think they will try to continue to pursue this issue because the MGC, they're a vengeful group, like they don't let things go. I don't really know if they can like really get the operators in trouble. You know what I mean? Like they haven't done anything.
Yeah, they haven't violated any of the state regulations or anything like that. It comes down to that level of trust that you need between operators and regulators in these kind of frameworks. And I think that level of trust has probably been dented a little bit. I can understand where the operators are coming from. That some of them are listed companies. They don't want to be giving away those secrets, but you do have to be in dialogue with regulators on these kind of things, particularly in Massachusetts, where we spoke about it a lot. There is a high degree of sort of consumer protection awareness in that state.
Yeah, I mean, I think, too, there comes a point, like, operators have played ball with Massachusetts on a lot of things, and they have done some things that have been perceived in the industry, like people won't say it out loud, but in other quiet conversations, as overstepping. I tweeted this the other day, so let me just pull up. If you want to come into Massachusetts and offer sports betting, here's what you need to do. You're going to pay $1 million a year for a license. You will have an elaborate in-person license vetting process. You need a credit card ban that includes fencing out credit card deposits from other states where it's fine to deposit via credit card. If you have logo displays within the state, you have to ensure that they say 21 plus on them. You will have benchmarks for DEI and veteran hiring for your vendors and your employees that will be checked on an annual basis. You need to do a good faith effort to promote the Massachusetts lottery, and you need to adhere to a bespoke data privacy regulation that impacts your business plan in every state. And oh, by the way, you're entering a state that floated an idea of raising the tax rate to 51% from 20%.
And now we kind of understand why there were 15 licenses available and only
now there
6.
7 operators,
Yeah.
6, right? Yeah, that's a lot to ask. And Massachusetts, while a sizable state, like it's not one that you necessarily need to have, as we've seen from a lot of operators that have washed their hands of it or never bothered with it. So I think operators are in a tricky spot where they have to figure out what's the balance between kind of fighting back when things get really onerous and difficult and you're creating an untenable situation, and being good actors in the state. I wish them luck on this. I don't know how you do it because it's a tricky spot to be in.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just Massachusetts either. The previous story that we've spoken about, things can change, not only on the regulatory level, but on the legislative level. And you just have to be alert to it. You have to adapt to it. And it's going to take people a lot smarter than me to work out how to do that, because it does seem quite difficult.
Yeah, I don't envy them at all, but we will obviously have more on this on SBC Americas as the MGC follows up on things, as more states like New Jersey consider potential tax hikes. So be sure to check out SBC Americas on the regular for all that, and keep tuning in each day on iGaming Daily for the latest headlines and biggest news from the gambling industry worldwide.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.